Well, God bless you and good morning. And thank you so very much for joining us here on the set of Kingdom Voice. My name is Apostle Lance Bellany. And as always, it is my pleasure to have you here with us, to have you join us and to be a part of the broadcast, to make it what it is to be. And I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule to join us here today. And as always, I want to invite all of you to connect with us and to check in with us as you see fit and as Holy Spirit leads you and allows you to just connect and to share and to be a part of this glorious and wonderful journey that we're on into the kingdom of heaven. And I know there are a lot of people and there are a lot of things that are happening in the world today. There are a lot of things clamoring for your attention and requesting your attention, whether it's work or politics or social issues or current events or whatever the case may be. These things are family. These things are clamoring for your attention, and for you to take a few minutes out of your activities to spend with us. I want to make certain that I make the most beneficial use of your time and give you the value for your time in insight and just engagement that benefits you with the rest of your time that you're spending with others. So thank you so very much. I really do appreciate you being a part of the broadcast and being here with us this morning as we share truths of the kingdom from an apostolic perspective. And having said that, you can reach us if you prefer and would like to. You can reach us by email. You can reach me at lcbellany@yahoo.com. That is my personal email. That's the email that I get all of my personal business on. And so I want to invite you to reach me via email if you'd like to connect and discuss some things beyond what we talk about here on the broadcast. I'm certainly inviting you to do so and would welcome you reaching out. So thank you very much for doing so in advance. That's email. If you'd like to reach us on our website, it's rotruth.org, and there's just some more information there about the ministry, about the broadcast and our assignment, if you will, and would love to hear from you as well. If you'd like to reach us by regular mail, you can do so at Kingdom Voice Broadcast, or you can reach out to Rock of Truth Ministries, or directly to me at Lance Bellany. That's 214 Remington Road, Huntsville, Texas, 77340. That's 214 Remington Road, 77340, if you'd like to reach us there. And finally, if you receive podcasts or that type of entertainment, you can reach us on the Spotify platform at Kingdom Talk on the Spotify platform. Just type in Kingdom Talk, and you'll see our logo and our podcast home. So again, thank you so very much. It means a lot to us to have you engage with us, and I really would appreciate hearing from you, and do appreciate hearing from all of you that do reach out. So thank you so very much. Okay, today I want to engage with the idea and the understanding that not everyone shares the same worldview. Everybody doesn't share the same worldview, and I'm going to talk about that in some. I'm going to critically talk about that in what I believe and what I understand to be a good approach. It is not the only good approach to address the worldview issue and question, but it is a good approach. It's one that has served me well, and I think it'll serve anyone well that engages in it. As I said, it's not the only worldview approach to the worldview, but it is approach that I think will lead you to and down the path of truth. Okay, that is a critical component of this of this thing that we call life is truth. And are you in pursuit of truth, or are you in pursuit of just self-gratification? And that is a critical component of finding fulfillment in this life. Okay. And so not everyone shares the same world view. And it was interesting for me coming to that epiphany, in that I did think that everyone shared the same worldview, and that worldview was the one that I held. And for a long time in my life, I believed that. And so it was upsetting to me that we all didn't come to the same conclusions. And if we didn't come to the same conclusions, then you must be wrong because I held the right view. Okay. And you held the same view as I did. And so if you didn't reach what I reached, then you were wrong. You were the one that was that needed correction, and you were the one that needed to be set right. And that, unfortunately, is just not the case all the time. Sometimes we have to concede that there is a superior position or opinion or view than ours. And we have to be open to hear what that view is and how that view impacts the issues at hand, or how that view interprets and responds to the issues at hand. So it's important for us to understand that there are many different worldviews. I'm not suggesting that all worldviews are right. So let's back up for a second. Let's digress for just a second and talk about worldviews. Let's talk about and understand what that actually means. So when you hear the term worldview, people are referring to the way you philosophically approach and deal with social, economical, political, global issues. What is your perspective? What are the values that drive your perspective on those issues? Okay. For example, some people from a worldview standpoint, and let's start at the very top, they believe that there is no God, that humanity is the God that determines the outcome of all of these things, and that there are no divine interventions. Okay, that's a worldview. That's a typical worldview, that there is no God. Okay, that morality is subjective. Okay, morality is subjective is another worldview. Others hold the view that there is a God and that morality is determined by the biblical explanation for morality. So these are examples of what I mean when I'm talking about worldviews. And so I understand that everyone doesn't share the same worldview. Last week we talked about God being the author of the First Amendment, okay, which governs in this country free speech. That is a worldview. Okay, so that it suggests that the people are self-governing. The elected officials serve at the pleasure of the electorate. We elect a person, and that person goes in and represents our concerns at the government level, the federal or the state or the local level. And as a result of that, then they legislate in the best interest of their constituency. So that's a worldview, because not all countries, not all governments govern that way. We talked about this a number of times in previous broadcast where we talked about that there is the communistic approach, which is a worldview. There is the dictatorial approach. There is the socialistic approach. And then there is the capitalistic approach. Okay. All right. And so when you talk about worldview, in addition to capitalistic, there is also the democratic approach. And so within the democratic approach, you have a democratic republic, okay? And then you have other forms of democracy. So all of these tend to be and can be worldviews for their particular area of focus or concern, whether it's economic, whether it's political, whether it's educational, whether it is social. All of those worldviews vary one to the other. Now the question becomes, what is the right worldview? Well, I tend to believe that there is no quote unquote right worldview. It is the worldview that best fits the current situation or the population they're in. Now, let me explain that. Let me give some explanation to that in terms of worldview. Some people demand and insist straight up and down that there is the biblical worldview is the only and the best worldview. Now, I can attest to say that it can make the argument of being the best worldview, but it cannot make the argument of being the only worldview. And you're perfectly within the purview of your rights, if you will, to make the argument that it is the best worldview. Make that argument. Contend for that end goal. But don't make the mistake of making the argument that it is the only worldview, okay, that we should have. Because there are different worldviews out there, and not everyone shares that same worldview. Okay, there is the atheistic worldview, as we talk about. There is no God. Okay, and in the event that there is no God, then we govern the outcome. We govern and determine the outcomes. And so we have to be open to allow these other worldviews to have a say. I am a staunch believer that if we engage with others with different views than ours, we learn something new that we didn't already know. Okay? We learn something new that we didn't already know. And I want to challenge you, all of you that are listening right now, I want to challenge you and ask you the question, when was the last time God said something to you that you didn't already know? When was the last time you allowed God to challenge your worldview? When was the last time you allowed God to take you where you'd never been before? Okay? That's critical. That's important. Because when you allow God to do that with you, then you allow God to take you beyond your borders, to take you beyond your emotional, mental, psychological borders, not just physical borders. You allow God to expand your horizons. You allow God to take you on a journey. And when you hear me say, we're on a journey, that's part of what I'm talking about. That's part of the challenge that we have, is that when we are engaging on this journey, we're going from where to a place that we hadn't been the previous part of our journey. We're going to places that we're not familiar with. And that is good. That's a good thing, because you're growing, you're expanding. Conversations, engagements, discussions allow that kind of journey from where you're familiar to where you're unfamiliar. Have that conversation, engage that discussion with those that are presenting them. When you hear someone say something that you completely disagree with, let it be on the basis of you've experienced it and that you know the difference between the two. But if it is something that you've just never heard before, I would encourage you to engage with it, understand it, see what it has to deal with. I was in a conversation yesterday and someone made a comment to me. Someone made a comment to me to the effect that Apostle Paul was a flat out liar. I'd never heard that before. I knew Paul was controversial, but I never heard the term that Paul was a flat out unequivocal. He was a liar in many instances. And you know what I did? Because I'd never heard that before. I said, well, hold on, brother. Hold on. I want you to explain to me where that comes from, because I've never heard that before. Rather than be combative and confrontational, I leaned in to understand more, to hear more, to engage a little bit further. What did that afford me the ability to do? To understand where he was coming from, to understand where they were coming from, to understand why they said what they said, to understand the merit of what they said. And by doing so, allowed me to understand more of something that I didn't know. And as a matter of fact, as I said just a second ago, I leaned in, I admitted, I conceded, I'd never heard that before. And because I wasn't trying to be confrontational or combative or defensive, I was able to learn something. I was able to lower their guards so that they could freely share with me. And while they were sharing with me all the time, I am listening, measuring, considering, contemplating the things that they were saying. And in the process, I learned something. I'm not saying I agreed with them, but I certainly learned something. This is a part of what we have now as a North American unit of a society, I believe would do very well if we begin to lean in that perspective. Probably the most controversial and heated discussions that we have today is not even religion anymore. It's politics. Politics is probably the most confrontational, the most talked about, the most contentious discussions that we have in these United States of America. It has become the ground zero, if you will, of public life now. Everybody's talking about politics. Everybody's talking about the latest administration and the previous administration, the latest presidential race. Everybody's all up in arms and disturbed about all of the activities going on around the Washington, D.C. and the political arena. All of these things are now at the forefront, on the tip of our tongues, at the forefront of our thought processes. And if you say that is not the case, either somehow you've had your head somewhere else for this period of time, but it's hard to escape it. It's on the airwaves. It's on your phones. It's on your smart devices. It's on your televisions. And yes, those conversations are being had. One of the things that we have got to learn how to do is recognize that not everyone shares or sees the world the way we do. We do well to engage in the conversation. We do well to discuss the issues at hand. And when you engage in those discussions, do your level best to check the emotions at the front door. So here's one of the things that I do when I'm engaged in those kinds of conversations. One of the things that I mentally prepare myself for is that I'm not there to convince you to believe what I believe. It's not what I'm there to do. I'm there to share a perspective that you may not already have. So whether you accept it or not accept it, that's irrelevant to me. What I'm there to do is to share it so that you can at least hear it. What you do with it is your prerogative. I can't force you to do with it what I did with it, but I can, through course of conversation, share it with you. So I don't have to worry about getting upset and angry. I don't have to degrade and degenerate to name calling and character assassinations. Because a lot of times when people get into these types of conversations, because they're trying to convince the other ones that they're wrong and I'm right, or I'm right, or you're right and I'm wrong if you're coming from the other perspective, because that is one of the things that people effort to do and often try to engage in doing, then you get into confrontation, okay, instead of conversation. And then when the confrontation ensues, that's when you get into name calling. That's when you get into getting personal. And that's when the conversation begins to break down. And the discussions begin to take a personal tone. Name calling begins to ensue. And that's where it becomes unproductive. But when you understand, I understand that they may not share my worldview. Two things happen for me. One, I'm interested in sharing my worldview because they don't share it. They don't believe that that is perhaps the right way to go. And two, I'm interested in hearing what their perspective is about a particular issue. Okay? As we get ready to move on, I want to talk about paradigms. When I was a younger man, probably in my 30s, mid 30s, when I was a younger man, I I had this epiphany of sorts. And for the first time in my life, I came face to face with the reality that people see the world and circumstances, and when I say they see it, they internalize the experiences that they had different than me. I wasn't, in my way of perceiving the world, wasn't the only way out there, wasn't the only means, not means, but it wasn't the only psychological and emotional approach to these events that was out there. They had people that were more interpersonal than I was. Okay. They had people that were more cautious than I was. They had people that were more driving in their intent than I was. And then you had people that were steady, more steady. They were more calm and weren't so moved by the events at hand. And if you understand what I'm saying is that you have some people that can see an event and they sometimes appear to be very emotionless. I'll never forget when I was, and I'm going to get back to my story that I was talking about in my early 30s, but when I was a young boy, we had a teacher, I think his name was Mr. Sanford. And Mr. Sanford never rushed to get to anything or see anybody, or he was so smooth and cool. It was amazing. Somebody could be fighting on the playground, and he would just stroll his way over there, and finally he would get there. And we said, well, Mr. Sanford, why aren't you in a rush? He said, well, by the time I get there, they'll be tired, and then I can break them up easy. I'm sure that was in jest, but still, he didn't rush. So he was more steady, cautious, or should I say steady in his approach to things. That's just one of the memories that comes to mind. But the point being is that there are people out there that have different views, and the paradigms that come along with those views are uniquely distinct for each one of them. I didn't understand that psychological phenomenon existed out in the world. And when I learned that, I kid you not, when I learned that, when it finally came to fruition in my understanding, I wept. I wept for two reasons. One, because it was such a relief to understand that my frustration had an explanation. My frustration about why people weren't responding to those things the way I was had now reached a point where I finally had an explanation for for that phenomenon. Okay. And number two, I wept because I realized how unfair I was toward other people and how harsh I was on other people for not sharing my worldview or not sharing my paradigms. Okay. And I didn't understand that prior to that moment. And when I realized that, the flood and the rush of my past related to these issues came rushing in, and it just emotionally overwhelmed me. And from that day to this very day today, I've endeavored to try to understand the perspectives of other people, to see it from their perspective, to see it from their paradigm, to understand why they were and have been responding to the issues the way that they do. Give them an opportunity to share with me their paradigm. And again, I don't always agree, because I do have an understanding sometimes of the paradigm that they have and understand the pitfalls and the dangers of that paradigm. Okay? And I share that with them. But I at least understand where they're coming from. And I want to encourage you in the same light to recognize that not everyone shares that same world view. Not everyone shares that same worldview. Many of us who are Christians, many Christians share a biblical worldview. Now, let me give you an understanding, if you will, of the biblical worldview. And I don't agree with the biblical worldview because it's fraught by interpretation. Now, some would say that my worldview is akin to the biblical worldview, and I wouldn't argue that point. I would have to concede that point. But the approach that we take with a biblical worldview forces everyone into an interpretation of the Bible. That's where the biblical worldview comes from. It forces everyone into a narrow interpretation of Scripture, of the Bible, in order to harness the worldview of the biblical perspective. Okay? I think, and here's where, if you will, where I have hard lines in terms of my worldview. This is where I draw not lines in the sand, okay, but I draw lines in stone, okay. One, that there is a God, a creator of all things. That God governs all that we have and know to be life. Okay? There is a God that created all of this. It's number one. Number two, that God redeemed humanity to themselves. That they redeemed us and redeemed humanity through the sacrifice of themselves in the earth. Okay? I believe that. I believe that. And third, the redemption of my humanity, the redemption of my spirit, made me one with them. Those are hard lines in stone that are immutable for me. Beyond those hard lines and derivatives thereof, if you will, beyond those hard lines is where I engage in paradigms, perspectives, and leanings. And what I mean by that is you have a perspective on it, you have a leaning toward that, you have an understanding of that, and we can discuss those things and so forth. And the parts are movable and sometimes interchangeable beyond those. But once you get to that hard line in the stone, for me, those things are immutable. They are unchanging. They are final. Okay. And here's why, and you've often heard me say this. One of the things that and the reason that I hold these lines, if you will, immutable is because I heard from God themselves. I heard from God themselves that these were so. No one told me that. No one tried to make me believe that. I, in my own intimate engagement with God, heard God say to me these things. And until God changes those things in me, then I will hold fast to those things. And like I said, beyond those things, the parts are changeable, movable. They fit that criteria of God. And I can move forward with them accordingly. So it's important for us to understand that as we are sharing our worldview or our paradigm and perspectives, that others may not share that. So rather than going into that discussion or having that engagement from a standpoint of, I'm here to convince you to believe like me, go into it. And I highly recommend you going into it. I'm here to share what I believe and willing to listen and hear what you believe. Now, one would ask the question, well, if that's the case, how do we have a society with everybody believing? Then we get into this, the realm of public discourse. Public discourse. I heard something one time, and I'm going to get a little bit political here, but I heard something one time where someone said, you get the government you deserve. Excuse me, you get the government you vote for, and you vote for what you deserve. Okay. And what that implies is that the people have the right to self-governance, and by virtue of self-governance, you vote, we here in America vote for representatives to take our grievances and our causes to the legislative and create laws that address our grievances. This is something that we have to begin to recognize, that when we engage in public discourse, we allow the masses to hear the various perspectives and worldviews, or, if you will, views on a particular matter. Those issues are debated, and people, having heard those issues, formulate what they believe about those issues, and then they in turn vote according to what they believe. And that, to me, is probably the purest way of things to progress. And we can talk about all these other governing ways, but I won't go there today right now. What I will say, is it's important for us to allow all of those perspectives to be heard, and then us make a decision. Have you ever heard the term an informed decision? You may have heard that. What that means is I'm making a decision based on the best information available. Okay? The best information available. And that's all we can ever do. But if you shut your ears to the information that is out there, then you are not making an informed decision. You're making a biased decision. And you want to get away from biased decision making. You want to get into and lean into informed decision making. And this is one of the things that I started to enjoy when I realized that not everyone shared the same worldview that I have. And worldview is a broad use of the term, but not everyone shares the same paradigms that I have. They don't value the same things that I value. They don't hold to dear the same things that I hold dear. For example, some people don't hold family very dear to their hearts because the experiences that they had in a family were so negative. So they look down on the family, or they don't have a high regard for the family consideration. Whereas someone like myself, who did have a good functional operating family around them, holds family dear to me. It's everything. Everything starts with the family. Okay? That doesn't mean I shut a blind eye when family gets out of line or anything of that nature, but I understand and hold value how important to me family is. And to someone else, family is not that important to them. Family doesn't hold the same value to them as it does to me. They have a different focus for social engagement. And because that is foreign sometimes, and not sometimes, because that is foreign to me, I'm always eager to hear, one, how did they arrive at this place? And two, what do they use to guide them on a social network, on a social basis? Okay? Some people don't think education, in formal education, is important because there are many different types of education. We all understand that. But some people don't think education is very critical in a formal sense. Going to high school, going to college, going to postgraduate school, getting advanced degrees. That's not very critical to them. Okay? And that's okay. That's okay. Then what is critical to you? How do you engage in educating yourself? These are the things, and these are the approaches, and these are the what I find value in. Okay? As a matter of fact, the very thing that I'm talking about right now is a paradigm. How to approach differing opinions. That's a paradigm. Some people believe that you should just overpower the other person, shut them down. That's a paradigm about public discourse. Matter of fact, we hear it in the news nowadays. We call it the cancel culture. Okay? If I don't agree with you, then I just shut you down. I shout you down. I make it to where you can't talk. And again, from my paradigm, what value does that come? So I want to understand, why do you believe that works? Why do you believe that works? Now, because I can speak to that on both sides of the equation, I can hold a stronger position on that issue of this isn't productive, this is productive. What about shutting people down advances a productive cause? What about hearing people out that advances a productive cause? Let's discuss those differences. This is what I'm talking about when I say, when you understand everybody doesn't share your same paradigms or your perspectives or beliefs or worldview, it opens the door to begin to try to at least understand where they're coming from. And if I can share and understand where they're coming from, what they do believe, what they do value, then I can really begin to lean into those where they are. Okay. To at least from my perspective, if I differ from where they are, couch my response in such a way that perhaps they can hear something that may encourage them or even change their minds about where they are. Okay. Before we go on, I want to invite all of you to, if you have any thoughts or comments or questions that you'd like to share, please feel free to do so. I would love to hear your thoughts and your comments about what we're talking about, and whether they're in line with what I'm saying or whether they're in opposition to what I'm saying. Please, let's dialogue. There we go again. Here is the outplay of what I'm actually talking about. Not everybody share this that I'm talking about. Well, let's talk about it. Let's dialogue about it. If you have some thoughts on these issues, okay? All right. What are the downside? And I'm gonna go back to what I talked about last week. As I was listening to the vice president and his speech at the German Security Council, I found it very interesting, some of the things that he's saying. So let's digress for just a minute. Coming out of the UK, or Great Britain at the time, gave birth to what we now today know as the United States of America. A quintessential example of how the student surpassed the teacher. Okay? When you understand that dissidents and persecuted individuals fled Great Britain to come to the new shores of what they called North America. Okay, and that's a debate to be had. I understand that, but suffice it to say that it became, we were taught it as North America. They fled a ragtag approach, uncultured, if you will, unorganized, and then finally becoming a union. And then that union became a united and unified group of individuals that became communities, states, nation, and a government that followed a constitution that guaranteed the rights of its citizens. All of that ensued. A community that embraced diversity, that embraced the differences, that welcomed non-citizens to come and to join this experiment that some people like to call it, has now risen from a fleeing dissident community to the premier global power in the world. Some people says, and we can talk about how and why that happened and all of those things, and I get that, and I'm all for the discussion. But the fact is, we've arrived at that status in this world. The premier superpower in the world. And where we left, and I'm getting to my comments about J.D. Vance, and where we left is a shell of what it used to be, clinging to its global status by the thinnest of margins, dependent on that ragtag group of people that left them 200 years ago to now help them defend themselves. It is amazing. And the one thing that we have that many foreign nations and global nations are dissenting from, the one thing that we have is the right of the people to voice their grievances and differences. I can say openly on public discourse, I disagree with the President of the United States for these reasons, and have my right to say those things protected. What most of us fail to understand is that many industrialized nations, Germany, in Europe, the UK, because they've exited the EU, but they're still a part of Europe. In Australia, while they're not on the European continent, they're their continent of themselves, but they are an extension of the European continent, just as we are abandoning the rights and freedoms of speech. When you disallow differing opinions to emerge, you hit diversity at the knees. You cut it off at the knees. And then you begin the downward death spiral to destruction. Because if I cannot hear dissenting opinions, I incarcerate myself and I sentence myself to an echo chamber. We talked about that last week. I sentence myself to an echo chamber. And that echo chamber will only make me feel good until someone else superior to me comes and dominates me. That's what subverting and suppressing open disagreements with one another amounts to. It has happened over and over and over. This is why this is the only reason, but this is one of the reasons why I am such an advocate for open disagreement, because it challenges me to examine what I believe. And this is why I am opposed to canceling and shouting down and disallowing dissenting opinions to have their say. It's important. It's important, and it is imperative for us to be able to have dissenting opinions. Here is something you have to be prepared for. And I'm going to get to to the crux of my thought here in just a second. But back to J.D. Vance. So what he was suggesting when he went to the German Security Council was that the countries in Europe are beginning to engage in a practice where if you do not follow and if you do not agree with the majority opinion, you shut your mouth. This is what he was speaking about. You shut your mouth and let the majority opinion rule, and you just keep quiet about your disagreement. Because what the majority is starting to do, this is a fact in Europe, is they are putting people in prison, sending messages to the broader community. If you do what they do, you will be in prison too. So that by extension curtails people's willingness to speak out and speak truth to power. And we're now seeing case after case after case in our European neighbors that they are incarcerating people with differing opinions and are publicly voicing those differences. We are incarcerating those people. They are stripping away the rights of those people to have those dissenting thoughts and voicing those dissenting thoughts and opinions. And that doesn't lead us to anywhere that is going to be productive. Okay. And so the vice president brought that to their attention. Now let me say this. It was so compelling, his speech was, that a grown man that was that shared a dissenting opinion from J.D. Vance was so upset by what he said that he literally got on the stage trying to complete the task that he was given to do, and was so moved by emotion that he came to tears and had to walk off stage. Now, I want you to grab the gravity of that for just a moment. You disagreed with someone so much and didn't have a response to what they said that you had to resort to tears to address your disagreement. I find that extremely difficult for me. If anything, if I disagree with it that much, then I want to know why you share that belief, Mr. Vance, Vice President. Help me understand where you see what I'm doing as so destructive or unproductive. Help me understand that. I may not agree with you about what you believe about what I'm doing, and that's fine. But help me understand why you believe I'm doing the things, or why the things that you believe I'm doing are so destructive. Rather than getting up there, being so upset, and feeling that your only recourse was to shed tears about being hurt about what somebody said about what you're doing. I find this to be extremely a bit disconcerting for me as I watch that unfold. And so I want to encourage all of us to begin to lean into discussions with people that have differing opinions from you, understanding that there is an opportunity to learn something that you don't already know. And I will absolutely, believe that you will be the better for it rather than the worse, because you will learn something that you don't already know. I'll close with this before I get to your comments. Thank you so very much, Melissa. And anyone else, if you have any thoughts or comments as we get ready to wrap it up, please feel free to share those thoughts and comments right here. And I can see them as they come in. I can see them off of Facebook as well as off of YouTube. So please feel free to share those, your thoughts. One of the philosophical approaches that I've taken, and I remember this coming to fruition probably 25 years ago. And I can remember I was a pastor at the time, and I was standing in the pulpit, and I was sharing and delivering a sermon, and I heard Mother say to me, she said, "When what you believe cannot address the question that is being presented, then it is time to believe something else." Now I want you to grab that. Let me dissect it just a little bit. When what you believe, whatever your belief is about whatever it is that you're dealing with, and someone challenges what you believe with a request or a question or something that from their perspective about that same issue, and you don't have a response to that question, your belief and the things that you've accumulated around that belief can't respond to that question. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I believe God created man and woman. I believe God, and someone comes and asks the question, well, where did I think I forget oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. The wife of one of the sons of Adam and Eve. Where did she come from? Okay, that's an example of okay. Where did they come from. I believe God created man and woman, but the Bible doesn't talk about where that woman came from. That's not to say that God didn't create man and woman, but that is to say I didn't have an answer for the question that they asked. So now I had to go get more information, understand more about the creation story to be able to answer the question, where did that woman come from that their son married? If God only created them, where did that woman come from? You see what I'm talking about? When what you believe can't answer the question that is presented, then it's time to believe something else. I had to expand my understanding about the creation. Okay? And that's important and for us to and that's important for us to recognize. And I use that even to this very day to help me manage the things that I deal with on a daily basis. So I see some of the questions. Melissa, thank you so very much. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and comments. You were asking the question, and I'll throw it up here. It says, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to get to it in real time, but makes a lot of sense. This is also called fellowship, is it not? Yes, it is a sense of fellowship when you begin to engage with others and you begin to dialogue around issues. There may not be agreement around those issues. There may be disagreement. Sometimes they will call councils, okay? The Council of Nicaea is one of those instances where different and dissenting opinions came together and hopefully to reach consensus. I don't think they reached consensus. I think there was a dictatorial approach in that, but needless to say, sometimes they're called councils. Come now, let us counsel together. Let us reason together. God talked about that in the sense of, though our sins be as scarlet, they shall be made white as snow. Reasoning and counseling. God loves to do that. You have here guaranteed rights of citizens, and you have triple question mark. And I'm assuming that you're asking the question. Melissa, I do believe that here in this country we share a unique and distinct privilege of citizenship than many countries in the world does. Yes, money influences a lot of the legal proceedings in our country. There's no question about that. I'd be lying to you if I told you I didn't believe that. Okay. Money can buy better legal representation, higher knowledgeable. And now, again, if you notice, and I'm going to digress here for just a second, but we call it practicing law. Not all attorneys are equally skilled, are equally knowledgeable. Not all attorneys are equally resourced. Some attorneys are just better. Some attorneys have more resources. Some attorneys have more knowledge. Okay. And if your money can afford that attorney, you're probably going to get better representation. But what we do guarantee you in this country, okay, is a public attorney. We guarantee if you don't have one will be provided to you. Okay, I forget the term right off, but basically you get a public attorney, one appointed to you from the state. That's a guarantee in our country. Okay, a lot of countries don't afford you that. Now, there's no question about it that a public attorney and a high-priced personal attorney are probably going to give you two different types of representation. But at least you are guaranteed representation in our country. Melissa goes on to say, and we don't stand up. And we don't stand up, we will see the same on these shores. Yes, Melissa, I think you're talking about the idea of freedom of speech being eroded. Absolutely. I'm going to say something that is going to be controversial. So, disclaimer. Where the last administration was taking us, I had great concern about this very issue. shutting down free speech. And I said this last week, and I'm going to repeat myself here today. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, I made a conscious decision not to get vaccinated. That was my decision. There were members of my immediate family that chose to get vaccinated. We accepted the decisions of all of us. I made the decision not to get vaccinated. On my job, because I was expressing my right to choose how I handle my personal body and my personal health. On my job, there was the threat of termination. It was starting to have that discussions, and it was targeted at people who chose not to become vaccinated. At the time, I was working for a company that was owned by a British conglomerate, and the edict was coming down from Great Britain, who at that time was leaning all in on the vaccination, and the people that work for us have to be vaccinated, and so forth and so on. It didn't come to termination, but what it did come to was public humiliation, shaming. So what they forced me to do was that they forced me to put a sign on my office door, close my office door 3/4 of the way or more, so that anyone coming by would see that I was unvaccinated and they could make the choice to come in my office or not to come in my office. But they wanted everyone to know that I wasn't vaccinated. Okay? They would not allow me to just operate and exercise my freedom of decision, but tried to shame me into doing that. So I agree with you, Melissa, that a lot of what went on in the previous 4 years was eroding away at our freedom of speech. We don't have that problem today. No one's trying to take your freedom of speech from you. But what it is doing is allowing people that differ from you to say, as loud as you're saying, their side of the equation. And I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that. Melissa says this: I appreciate your openness about this subject. Not too many want to hear others. Absolutely. Melissa, that is one of the things that we have to begin to understand, is that we have to hear others, and others don't always agree with us. And that's okay. That's how I learn something new that I don't already know. The people that agree with me, we live in an echo chamber together. The people that disagree with me is where I get to learn new things that I don't know, that I don't already know. Lady Jolene Poole says this: too many people are not willing to consider open opposing opinions. There will never be universal agreement on anything. We must rely on Elohim. Absolutely. And I'll close with that. Too many people are not willing to consider open opposing opinions. And that's what they are. Opinions. Until the facts come around. But when you're talking about social issues, let me say this. When you're talking about social issues, it's all 90% of it is opinion until the facts come around. And then now even those facts are subjugated to opinion. Okay? Because I can choose to ignore the facts, if you will, and continue on with my opinion. But we have to allow the debate to ensue, to unfold, to take place. And if we allow the debate to take place, the best ideas will ultimately rise to the surface. I'll close with saying, well, before I close, I see, Melissa, you have one more comment. And now insurance companies are not paying any policy of persons who took place the COVID-19, who took place in the COVID-19 study. They are calling it a study, but we're trying to force people to take that jab. I wasn't aware of that, Melissa. So thank you. I'm going to look that up. I'm going to begin to explore that. And this is why we dialogue. This is a piece of information that I had no clue of. But if you don't make the space for that type of dialogue to happen, you shut yourself off from learning new things. Quintessential example of the message that I'm talking about or the presentation that I'm giving today. Not everyone shares the same worldview. We have different opinions. And when you allow those opinions to allow the discussions to take place, guess what? You learn something new. How about that for a novel idea? So I'm going to look that up. But yeah, so now they're calling it according to Melissa, they're calling it a study that was done. And so now the insurance companies are backing out of the liabilities that they have. Well, we'll see how far that goes. But I think, again, when we allow these issues to ensue, or the discussions to ensue, we learn things that we don't already know. Well, listen, beloved, not everyone shares your same worldview. Engage with them to understand what their worldview is or what their paradigms and perspectives are, and you'll get a chance to learn something that you don't already know. I promise you that. Amen. Well, listen, thank you so very much, everyone, for joining. I want to ask those of you that are here today that if you would like to share a gift with the ministry, with what we're doing here at Kingdom Voice, please do so. You can reach me at on the Cash App platform at $LC Bellany. That's my handle on the Cash App platform, or you can reach me on the PayPal platform at $LC Bellany, and you can make a contribution there as well. So I would ask if you could make a contribution. It would mean a lot. And if not, please continue to listen, share this broadcast with those of you in your social media networks. Please share this if you thought that this had some value to what to your journey and your walk of faith. Amen. Until next time, next Sunday morning, right here, 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. I want to ask you to be well, be blessed, and we'll see you next Sunday morning. God bless everyone.